Okay, so we've got pretty much all the systems in our game working nicely now. The last few things we need to do is just to make the project something that our players can use. So one thing we really need in our levels at the moment, I'm going to go to my test level here just to do the little bits that we want to do here, is we need to have a way to pause the game so we can get back out to the level select whenever we want to, and also we need to add the shuffle button in. So we have the shuffle mechanic, but we've no way for players to do it with their mouse currently or with their fingers if they're on mobile. So we need to set both of those things up. So we're going to start off by laying out the pause menu and the buttons that we're going to use here. So let's go to our UI canvas. I'm going to grab my button from the UI here. So let's drop this onto our UI canvas like so. And I'm going to move this over to roughly about here. And this is going to be our shuffle button. So we're going to make this nice and big like so. And we're going to call this the shuffle button. And I'm going to duplicate that, and then we're going to move it down and shrink down this bit, and this is going to be our pause button. Then of course we need to make the text actually say both of those things, so shuffle and pause. And then of course if we're going to pause the game, we're going to need a screen to show up when we pause the game. So let's go to UI canvas, we're going to right click and add a UI panel. I'm going to remove this source image and I'm going to make the color be black and a little bit more covered up than that. So that's our transparent kind of color. And we're going to call this the pause screen like so. And we're going to add some text to it. So a UI text. We're going to have this one just say paused in really big. So we're going to drag this box out nice and large up the top here like so. And we're going to make it auto size up to 300. 300 is the max size you can use anyway. You can't go any bigger than that. And then we're going to make it bold as well, and we're going to center it. So there we go, we've got paused, appears there. And I'm going to take, I'll just take a new button in here. I'm going to drop this onto our pause screen. So we've got one button here. I'm going to duplicate it and move it down to here and duplicate it again down to here. So let's set up what these buttons should be. So we're going to have obviously one to resume the game, because obviously we want to unpause. We're going to have one for level select. And then finally we're going to have one for quitting. So to quit completely out of the game. So let's add the text to say the right things here. So we have resume and we'll have level select. And we'll have quitting the game. Okay, so let's set this stuff up first of all. Now, one thing actually I just noticed with my buttons here is they go right to the very edge, and I don't really want that. So let's double click on our button and grab the Text Mesh Pro box. And I'm just going to drag it in from the side here so it never quite overlaps with the very edges that we have here. So we always have a bit of space around whatever text we have. Okay, so we're going to need to make these buttons actually do something. So let's set up the functions that will do that. So let's go into our UI canvas and we're going to go into the UI manager. And we know we're going to want to load out to different scenes. So let's say using Unity Engine.scene management, like so. So let's set up the functions we're going to use. So let's go down here. And we're obviously going to need a function for pausing the game. So we're going to have a public void pause unpause. So we're going to use the same function to either pause or unpause the game, depending on whether we're already paused at the moment. We'll return back to that in a moment. Then we're going to have the shuffleboard public void shuffleboard. Then we're going to have a public void for quitting the game, which we had on the pause menu, and we also had on the pause menu public void for go to level select. Oops. Like so. Okay, we're going to need one more function as well, but I haven't set up the button for it, so let's just jump back in here for one moment. And we'll assign these functions in here, just so we have that all set up and done for us. So let that compile. And then on each of these buttons, they all need to have a slot and a reference to the UI canvas. So shuffle button obviously should call the shuffle function. Pause should call the pause button. Resume will also call the pause on pause function. Level select should call the go to level select, and quit should obviously call quit game. So in addition to these ones, I'm just going to hide this pause screen for the moment, and I'm going to move these buttons up so they're behind the round over panel. Or we can't do that until we make changes to the prefab. We'll do that in a moment. But let's just take our round over panel here, and you know what? Let's apply the changes we've made to the prefab already. So we're just going to apply those and then open the prefab so it opens in its own kind of unique view here. Within here, we're able to move these buttons around, so I'm going to move them behind the round over panel. And on the round over panel, we need two buttons here. We need one to try play the level again, and one to return to the level select to go to the next level. So let's grab the let's grab one button here. We've got the level select button. I'm going to duplicate that and pop it onto the round over panel here. So we've got our level select down here, like so. Let's say we're going to make it nice and big so we can easily click on it. We've got level select. I'm going to duplicate that, and then over here we're going to say we'll have the try again button, and the text on this is just going to say try again. So we're going to need a function for that one too. So let's go back in here, and we're going to put this, we'll put this down here, it doesn't really matter. So public void try again, and that'll be a way basically to just reload the level we have. So I'm just going to let this save, and I'm going to assign that function to this one. So UI manager try again. Okay, so we've got all our functions set up correctly. Let's just hide our round over panel by default, and then let's go back in here and let's make it so that these functions all do something. Now I'm going to leave pausing till last because that's slightly more complicated, but we can do our other ones very, very easily. So first of all, our shuffle the board. To shuffle the board, we have the function on the board to do that, so we need a reference to the board. So we're going to have a private board that we'll just call the board, and then in the, as we've done before, in the awake function we'll say the board equals find object of type board. And then down here in the shuffle board section, we'll just say the board dot shuffle board. Okay, so nice and simple, nice and straightforward. Then for quitting the game, as we've done before, application dot quit. Nice and simple. To go to the level select, obviously we're going to need a reference to the name of the level select. So let's go up here, and we're going to say public string level select, and then down here we're going to say do we have a scene manager? We do have scene manager, that's grand. So we're going to say scene manager dot load scene level select, like so. So again, nice and simple. One slightly more complicated is our try again, but our try again is actually not too bad either. All we have to do for our try again is say scene manager dot load scene, and the scene we want to load is whatever the current active scene is. We just say scene manager dot get active scene dot name. Same way we use this to, if we go to our round manager to store the name of the level when we're saving it to the player prefs, we can get the name of the level that we currently have active, and then it'll tell it to load that scene again. And what it'll do is it'll just basically reset the scene back to its initial state. Okay, so that's it for all those buttons. Let's test those out just to make sure they work. They're pretty straightforward. If we let this compile, if I go ahead and play, I can do my shuffle. That works great. Pause doesn't do anything right now. If I put up my pause screen though, I can, oh no, not in the prefab, in the actual one in our scene. There we go. Put up on pause screen. Resume doesn't do anything currently. Quit game obviously doesn't do anything visually to us. It'll only apply when we build the final game. But we can go back out to our level select. or at least we could if there wasn't an error. Well, there is an error because we didn't set a value for our level select. So let's go here into our prefab and we're going to say level select. I was supposed to give that a default value and I never did. So let's just do that again. Put up our pause screen, go out to our level select. There we go. So perfect, we're back out in our level select and then we can go into whatever level we want. So that works perfectly fine. So the only thing we're missing is the activation of the pause screen. So let's jump back into here. Obviously we want to deactivate or activate the actual pause screen itself. So we'll need a reference to that. So public game object pause screen. And then what we're going to do is when we press this button, we're going to say if the pause screen dot active in hierarchy. So we're going to say, so here would be checking, is the pause screen already active? But what we're actually going to do is check if it's not already active. So we're saying, hey, are we not paused? If we're not paused already, then first of all, activate that screen. So pause screen dot set active true. And then obviously when we pause the game, we don't want our gems to be matching in the background or anything like that. We don't want any actions to be happening. So we can set the time in Unity to not pass at all. And how we can do that is simply by saying time.timescale equals 0f. So setting it to be equal to 0f will mean that time will no longer pass in the game. So let's just test that bit out to make sure we see that in action. So we'll let this compile. I'm just going to open our prefab again so that I can assign the pause screen into that slot, like so. So then when we play the game, now when I click pause, there we go, we can pause. We can't get back out of pausing at the moment, but that's perfectly fine. But you can see, let's start this process. Let's make a match and then pause while they're falling. So we've paused it. You can see there's still some particles. If I just maximize this here, you can see there's still some particles here. We haven't let the next section drop in. That's because our time is completely stopped. So we obviously want to be able to undo that. So we want to say if you press it again while it is paused. So here we're going to say else, because here we're checking if it's not active, but if it is active, well then in here, deactivate the screen. So pause screen dot set active false and set our time.timescale to be equal to 1. So let's save that. Let's go back in here. And there's one more little issue which we need to fix with this, but for now this will be perfectly fine. So I can go ahead and pause. You'll see our time is stopped over here. I can resume and time starts again. If I do a match, I can pause and I can resume and everything goes back into action. But the error that we're going to have now is that if I pause the game and go to my level select, everything looks perfectly fine here. That's all great. But if I go into another level now, level 1 for example, all our gems are stuck at the top here and our time isn't counting down, which should hopefully clue you into the fact that the game is still technically paused. Our time scale is still set to be 0. So if I go to pause here now and then resume again, it'll start time because we have that function that tells it to set the time scale back to being 1. But it's really important to note that if you set the time scale to 0, that's going to apply to your whole game. So whenever you're in a position where your time scale is 0, you need to say, if you load into another scene or anything like that, you need to remember to set the time scale back to 1. And we know when we have the game paused here that the only buttons we have active are resuming the game, quitting the game, or loading to the level select. So if we go down to load to level select here, right before we load, we're just going to say time.timescale equals 1. So now if we do the same thing and play the game, we should see, if we pause, level select, go back into a level, we're back into normal speed. One other thing we want to verify is that now that we set up the round over screen to work correctly, we want to make sure that it is actually, those buttons are actually showing up. So if I just let the time count down, there we go, we've got our try again and our level select. So let's try again. Reloads the same level. Again, let's set our time down to 1 second. And we'll go to level select and it'll bring us back out to the level select screen. So perfect, that's working nicely. That's doing exactly what we wanted to do. Just while I'm here, we have a few levels now. So let's go back to our level select and we're going to say that our buttons here. Let's grab this one. This should be level 3 now. So down here it should be level to load is level 3, and we should put the number 3 on it. And then the same here. This should be level 4. Put the number 4 on it, and we're loading to level 4. So just to verify we can go into these places, there we go. We've got our setup grid here. Let's go back out to the level select, go to level 4, and there's our stones all working nicely. So perfect, that's working great. One other thing I want to do is, just as a very common thing when you're playing on a keyboard, it's very common to allow your players to hit escape to pause the game. So we're just going to add in here in the update of our UI manager, if input.getKey down bracket keycode.escape, call the pause, oops, not pause screen, call the pause unpause function. So save that, go back in here, and now when we play, we should be able to, I can just press escape. Oh no, I'm not in the level, so that won't work. I can press escape on the keyboard here, and it'll allow us to pause and unpause the game. Perfect. So that's our pause screen and our menus in the level all working correctly.